Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, sir. Yes, we need the microphone, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Since I work for Bloomberg Radio, microphones are just fine. Irv Chapman. I'd like to ask, noting that the array of Republicans behind you and the fact that the top three porkers on your list on the Senate are Republicans and the top two in the House, what's the difference between the $17 billion in pork, which members characterize as constituent service, and members of both parties from oil states trying to save $18 billion in tax breaks, members from farm states of both parties trying to spend $22 billion on price supports, members of both parties from automobile-producing states trying to stave off fuel economy standards? Isn't it all the same, and maybe even the pork is cheaper?
I'd certainly let members address that, but I would say there's a vast difference in those types of activities. There's a process by which these funds are supposed to be spent. And within that process, which is passing laws that tell the federal agencies how to spend the money, whether there should be a competitive grant, for example, this goes around that process. So when they say we want to give a tax break or we'd like to pass some kind of subsidy, that applies all across the country. This is an inequitable way of dividing up the money. It goes mostly to the members of the appropriations committees. The names that we could identify, 55% Democrats, 44% Republican. That's a majority-minority split that's been approximately 60-40, 55-45 over the years. So this is taking a pile of money and just dividing it up because there's an opportunity to do so, which is why you can see Republicans at the top of that list, and they're sitting on the Appropriations Committee. Congressman LaHood, who's quoted in this publication, said he's on the Appropriations Committee because he knows that's where he can get the money. So there's a little bit, I think, a difference between arguing about whether a certain industry or someone else should get a subsidy or a tax break versus this process, which goes around what Congress has told agencies to do. Any other comment?
Tom is right in that there is a different process, at least a constitutional process of making laws on some of the things that were mentioned. But your question is good in that it does bring to light the fact that the earmarking process has changed the perspective and I think perverted the whole purpose of Congress to the point where we're no longer looking at a federal role, a constitutional role that has been specified as Paul has said. We now believe our role is to get money and benefits to particular groups and to particular areas of the country. And if you ask most congressmen and senators, I think because of the earmarking process, they think they're here representing their districts and their states instead of being representatives from their states and districts to the United States of America. And so the earmarking has taken our focus on America to focus on some special interests back home, most of which have no constitutional role at the federal level.
Yes. Other questions? Yes, sir. If you mind waiting for the mic, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Corson from CNN. Can you compare this to the success of reforming the Pentagon procurement process? It seemed like we got quite a few headlines and a lot of coverage of the $600 toilet seats at the Pentagon that you don't hear as much of anymore, but it's taking a lot longer, was this the 18th report, to really start to make inroads. Why the discrepancy in those two efforts?
Well, by the way, there was a report from GAO yesterday about $295 billion in cost overruns at the Pentagon, so I don't know that we've fully reformed the process. We probably know more about how they're doing this or why they're doing it, but the GAO report 6 years ago, they had a 6-month delay in delivery. Now it's 2 years, so there are certainly issues there. But to answer your question, the first Pig Book was issued in 1991, 512 projects, $3.2 billion, and we're very patient when it comes to seeking these kinds of reforms. I can't tell you how thrilled I am that we've gotten a vote on a moratorium in the Senate. And on that vote, the 3 presidential candidates agreed there should be a 1-year moratorium on earmarks. So this has become an issue for the entire country right now, not just a small group of members of Congress. And I think part of it was the Bridge to Nowhere and many other projects that really gained a lot of notoriety. The media certainly has played a very important role in getting the word out about what's going on with people's money. And I think people understand more about why these projects create the problems they do in Washington. The scandals certainly raised that issue with Congressman Cunningham going to jail, Jack Abramoff, the lobbying issues. So we've had some good reforms. We need more. Transparency is not enough. The fact that we've got 464 undisclosed projects shows they're not even paying attention to their own minor reforms. Senator DeMint was mentioning there might be a decision soon with the Senate group that's working on reforms. So we're going to continue to push this forward. So whether there's a moratorium or not, whether there are 36,000 requests again at the Appropriations Committee, we hope that the message is being received on Capitol Hill that taxpayers are really fed up with this whole process, and they want to see the end of earmarks, and short of that, a lot more reform. Anyone else want to comment on that? Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are you disappointed that Republicans haven't decided to go ahead with a unilateral moratorium? There were votes in the House and Senate in which, on the budget resolution, in which they would have had a one-year moratorium, and they both failed.
Well, I think members individually can certainly do that, and there are more and more members that are doing that. And look, anyone who does that on their own, it's certainly something that helps because it keeps the pressure on the members. But I think to say that, and I'll maybe let the members answer, but part of it may be that those that still want the projects are going to continue to push for them because they don't want to be left behind. So I don't know the internal discussions that you've all had, but yeah, that's it. There are some members that say, okay, we'll do it, but only if the other side does it, and others, like several of the members here, have taken the earmark reform pledge or have said on their own they won't take earmarks. There was 17 members, by the way, in the House and Senate, 17 senators and representatives who got nothing in this pig book. So we'd like that to be a much larger number. And short of that, I think there'll be, again, more efforts to push the... By the way, the better question is not why the Republicans didn't go on their own. The better question is, why didn't the Democrats go along with that? Because Speaker Pelosi had indicated that she was thinking about it, but I imagine there was a great deal of pressure from members of the Appropriations Committee, probably including our Porker of the Year, John Murtha, among others, to not do that. So I congratulate the Republicans for even getting as far as they did to agree to a moratorium, because it meant that at least the Republican appropriators were trying to do something a little bit different and agree to that effort. Other questions?